To watch this entire episode, please log in at hellfire.agency. Hellfire Agency is a godless mission of the Church of Korahor, a Utah-based spiritual community for atheists and agnostics. We do our best to research topics, but we are humans who get things wrong sometimes. Opinions are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily represent the position of the Church of Korahor or of any other entity. Remember to log in at hellfire.agency.
My friends, let us remember that so many things in this world could go wrong. So many things in this world could go right. We can always depend on a few things to be consistent in our world. Water is always wet, except when, and, the world is still round. And isn't it good to know that charlatans never change? And that's why we have reminders like Paula White Kane. Ooh, boy. Everybody got to get those donations going for when the lawyers come a-calling. You saw the disclaimer. If I get something wrong, I apologize, Paula White Kane. But it's just so hard to track down through all the lies. So I do my research. I do my best to get it right. Let's see how close I get. But first, just hot off the press, probably with some big mistakes in it, let us start the show. Let's go with the video file. It's so hot, I have not had time to load it yet. Where are you? Come on. It's not there. How can you not be there? You are at... Computer, you always do me wrong like this. Desktop. Do not put it on the desktop. Do not. Oh, good Lord. Oh, good Lord. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.
Just lift your hands. And by the way, let's start praying in the Spirit. Amen. Let's just pray in the Spirit. Amen.
And if a person wants to peacefully protest, that's one thing. But this has not been peaceful. It has been hateful. It has been hurtful. And it will not be tolerated by this president or his administration. And our office enforces that very strongly.
Sunday, you can receive these 7 supernatural blessings for you and your house. According to Exodus 23, God will assign an angel to you. He'll be an enemy to your enemies. He'll give you prosperity. He'll take sickness away from you. He will give you long life. He'll bring increase in inheritance, and he'll give a special year of blessing. You're not doing this to get something, but you're doing it in honor to God, realizing what you can receive.
For your special Passover offering of $1,000 or more as the Holy Spirit leads, you will also receive the beautiful 10-inch Waterford Crystal Cross. Don't miss your moment to release 7 supernatural blessings and provision into your life.
Jenny Korn say beyond their role as leaders of the White House Faith Office, they share a hope for America. That is to truly understand that America was founded on the principles of God.
Wherever I go, God rules. When I walk on White House grounds, God walks on White House grounds.
Say stuff like, well, Jesus was a refugee, and yes, he did live in Egypt for 3.5 years, but it was not illegal.
Big top goes up, preacher works the street. Come find Jesus at the meet and greet. Sell you heaven, then shake you from their feet. They'll raise the dead, they'll cure your gout. Pass the plate, take a pass on down, 'cause charlatans never change. Soothsaying in that holy name, fools burnt in holy flame. Oh, charlatans never change.
I won't kid you, friends. Sometimes I think I do it just for the music. Just for the music. All right. Here we go. Let's flash forward here to Paula White. If you don't know Paula White Kane, she is Donald Trump's personal spiritual advisor. Good for him. He could use some spirituality in his life. And she also is the head of his new faith office. I'm sorry. Now, this may seem like something kind of strange to think about. You know, how can the government have a faith office? Well, this actually started back in the George W. administration, and it was bad then, but President Obama kept it, and so it just continued on from there. It's only been, though, since Paula White Kane became the big cheese in this office. They've renamed it, and they've given it a lot more power, and it's super sketch. Basically, it traditionally is called the Office for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Initiatives and things. You know, they give it a name like this, and it's not an official cabinet position. It's a government position. It's mostly considered volunteer, and but during that time period when you're serving in that capacity, it's supposed to be organizing between NGOs and government entities to try and benefit people who are in a bad way in various parts of the country, is usually the way that it's supposed to work. Now, if you take the approach like so many of our brothers and sisters in faith out there, those of us who are unfaith, you know, we'll call them neighbors, we'll call them charlatans, and because that's what they are. You know, we can grow a little bit concerned when standards are not adhered to on what it means to serve in a faith-based role in the community, especially when one has a government job at the same time. So I just want to show you something. I'm hoping that this clip comes up. You know, it's been a little bit choppy with playing the clips. I'm not really sure if that appears to be on the side either of my computer or of StreamYard. We're going to work all these little kinks out, but let's try it. Let's just see what we can get.
Thousands of undocumented migrant families and even children at 2 Texas bases. Meanwhile, a federal judge has agreed to extend Tuesday's deadline for the government to reunite migrant children who were separated from their parents under President Trump's zero tolerance policy. In all this, influential faith advisor to President Trump, Pastor Paula White, visited one of those centers where migrant children were being held. Paula, thank you for joining us.
It's such an honor to be with you, especially on such an important issue as this. I went to the center in Bristow, Virginia, and it is beyond phenomenal. The care for the children, not just 3 square meals, psychiatric care, clinician, medical care,
So this is, of course, during the first Trump administration. As we now have the benefit of hindsight to see, it was not quite state of the art. It was not quite, the facilities were not quite up to snuff, as Paula White says here. But again, let's give her the benefit of a doubt to say, she visits it once while it was still early, maybe before it was overcrowded. Let's give her the benefit of a doubt and say she doesn't realize what she doesn't realize about these detention policies separating children from their families.
I mean, events, schooling, language, love. Most of the children arrive between about 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. and get a good night's rest and are given clothes, and they start the assessment, and that begins with medical, of course, and then there is a debt upon them that ranges between $3,000 to $7,000, upwards of $10,000 because of a coyote, because they've been smuggled, or their parent has mortgaged their home, put their land up, etc.
Exactly. So this visit kind of strengthened your issue on border security.
100%. And while I recognize how well we're taking care of these children, I also recognize the situation. We're talking about children that are being trafficked.
Since you did witness this.
Okay, keeping some opinions to myself. Okay, but you get the flavor of the idea. So the topic here is, you are a woman of faith. You are Donald Trump's spiritual advisor. You will have a pastoral responsibility towards this man who, again, to the best of my knowledge, and I have watched carefully, has never admitted that he is a sinner, has never said that he went to Christ to receive Christ into his heart, has never claimed to be saved, as far as I am aware. And every time that anybody asks her, what do you know about Donald Trump's conversion? What do you know about his salvation? What do you know about his repentance? She dodges. And so I'm just gonna say, well, okay, there's maybe some. Look, you can try to phrase it however you want. Some kind of confidence there for a man who can't cite the Bible, can't claim to anybody the moment when he was saved, can't tell anybody why he won't release the Epstein files without going on long tangents about everything from the garbage to one time my daddy said, don't eat at a restaurant if the door is dirty, because if the door is dirty, then the kitchen's dirty. And it's like, he goes off on all these tangents. It's like, show me exactly where the Christian is in this man. Show me where this Christian is. And so they're trying to find, and this is a CBN interview, so this is a Christian network, and they're trying to figure out where's the Christianity in this policy of separating children from their parents, in this and their families in these detention centers. And boy, Paula is trying to grab a piece of it somewhere. And she goes to just about the strangest place. I remind you, one of the things Paula could say here is nothing. Just say that's got nothing to do with the church. It's got nothing to do with faith. I hope he does the right thing. I believe he's a man of God, and just close it. What she does say is this.
Firsthand, talk to me about what biblical scriptures come to mind when you saw this.
Well, everyone, I think so many people have taken biblical scriptures out of context on this to say stuff like, well, Jesus was a refugee, and yes, he did live in Egypt for 3.5 years, but it was not illegal. If he had broke the law, then he would have been sinful, and he would not have been our Messiah.
Well, Paula White, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, we have to talk about that. Okay, so I'm going to get into who this person is in a second, but I just want to make a claim here. Okay, first of all, I just want to state, no one knows that this guy Jesus was a real person. I'm going to catch a lot of flack from those of my Christian friends, or both of you, Kai and whomever. I don't know, turn the other cheek, dude, because here it comes. No one knows that this guy Jesus was a real person. Nobody knows that he ever went into Egypt. The story of Jesus and Joseph and Mary being led out of Israel into out of Nazareth into Egypt was placed in the Matthew narrative that's not contained in the Luke infancy narrative, and it's not contained in the Mark narrative, and pretty much all historians that I know of agree Matthew must be built on Mark because of the similarities between the texts. And so basically you have Mark, then you have Matthew. Chances are probably then you have Luke, unless fill in the blank here, Marcion, Luke, redactions, etc. But the point is this. Whoever Matthew is, and we don't know, whoever Matthew is writing to a Jewish audience, that seems likely, he tries to make Jesus come out of Egypt to fulfill a prophecy out of the Old Testament that says that God's son will come, that my son will come out of Egypt, or to parallel some kind of story about Moses. So, and so this narrative gets added into the story. To say that, well, we ought to base any kind of U.S. immigration policy on this did not happen thing in the New Testament is patently absurd. But like it matters to Paula White, let me tell you a little bit about this person. Besides the fact that, she should read the Bible.
Years before he became.
She should get to know the Bible a little more. Get to read your Bible, Paula. Wish we were on a frame. Let's get to a frame of Paula. There's our girl, Paula. Paula, where are you? There she is. It's a great freeze frame. Let me tell you a little bit about this person, okay? This is Paula White Kane. She's married to the keyboardist from Journey. Now, whoa, scandal. In the early 2000s, televangelist Paula White caught the eye of real estate mogul and TV star Donald Trump when he saw her on on a Christian broadcast. That's her story anyway. Their first meeting came around 2002, kickstarting a relationship that would become pivotal for both figures as White's spiritual influence began weaving into Trump's orbit. What's not being talked about here at this point is her marriage to a man at the time who was her pastor back in the 90s when she started cheating on her first husband with the pastor who was cheating on his wife. They start knocking boots, they shack up, leave their spouses in some sundry order around there. That, definitely the part of the story of her pastoral rise that gets edited out of the story when she tells it. Okay, fine. She's repented. She's moving on. Red as scarlet, now white as snow. These sins are in her past. But in any event, who cares, right? Sinners are abound here. But just saying, for people who love to tout family values, they get sketchy. Starting in 2005, White and her then husband, Pastor Randy White, came under Senate scrutiny. The Senate Finance Committee, led by Chuck Grassley, everybody's favorite hound dog, launched an investigation into tax-exempt ministries. White's Without Walls International Church among them, suspecting potential misuse of donations. What do you know? Chuck Grassley, Republican bulldog that he is, showing up for the people and doing God's work and auditing these churches and bringing some people down. Just kidding. It all ended in nothing. He got there. He started exposing that people were, we're not as good at managing their finances as they claim to be. And then he didn't even refer anybody for pressing charges. It was kind of silly. And then the staff reports from 2007 detailed lavish compensation, personal use of private jets, and enormous housing allowances tied to an 8,000 square foot Florida mansion and a $3.5 million condo. Where else? In Trump Tower. Yeah. Oh, okay. It's starting to come home now. Documents also flagged a senior pastor's plastic surgery paid by the church as a possible case of private inurement. Though the inquiry formally closed in 2011 without penalties, it laid bare serious concerns about accountability. I just want to make a quick disclaimer just to mention, I don't, to the best of my knowledge, nobody has ever proven that Paula White herself or her husband, Randy White, to the best of my knowledge, by anybody who's willing to come forward, has used church funds to get plastic surgery. But that has long been one of the suggestions out there. Maybe it is a scandalous, nothing more than scandalous rumor. I'd say this: she first got married when I was 5 years old. My face, her face, my face, her face. Okay, you draw your conclusions. All right, Now about these mansions. Okay, so here's the curious thing. I believe this to be the case, as I understood, as I've been getting caught up on all the information. This was a particularly curious scam for Chuck Grassley or whomever, staff on Capitol Hill, to have discovered and then let go. Among the many things that appears to have been let go over the years, have been brought up over the years following Paula White's ministry, is that they would take homes that she and her husband lived in, these like mansions and condos, these swanky luxury abodes, and they would take these homes and pay the church would pay rent for these homes. I mean, you have ministers, they have to live in luxury. That's the way Jesus would have had it. And so you have to pay rent to the people who own those homes. Sensible, until you realize that they own the homes. So they live at home. Those homes are tax-free from as far as I know, depending on, I think it varies by state, is my understanding, from property tax, because they are where the pastors live. And pastors, they can't be expected. They're poor. They're poor church mice. They can't be expected to be paying taxes. And so they're exempt from it. And so they own these buildings. They own the homes. The church is paying the home's mortgages, apparently, at least in the case of one mansion. And then they're also paying themselves rent out of the church's donations. So that's quite a real estate scheme if it's true. But, old Chuck Grassley sees nothing wrong with that, apparently. Why did you even ask, dude? All right. Though the inquiry formally closed in 2011 without penalties, it's laid bare serious concerns about accountability. Meanwhile, the church's financial footing unraveled. After ambitious expansion, including property acquisitions such as Lakeland's Carpenter's Home campus, WWIC, that's Without Walls, defaulted on its loan, prompting a March 2014 Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. Court filings and media outlets reported that audio-visual gear was transferred from the church, that's Without Walls, to Paula White's newer ministry, fueling criticism of asset shifting amid fiscal crisis. Everything that I've seen so far points to that the amount that you can spend as a video guy. I'll say this: you spend a lot of money on AV. Oh yeah, sure. Cameras are nothing, are not even the beginning of it. You have the switchers, you have the lights, you have cables, you have microphones. It can get spendy in a hurry. Everything I have seen so far suggests somewhere in the ballpark of $600,000 worth of this church's AV equipment just gets on the truck here and gets off the truck over there. And what do you know? It's the new ministry's equipment, not the old ministry's equipment. And lo and behold, that ministry files for bankruptcy. What do you know? The Lord works in truly mysterious ways. Amid this turbulence, White's personal profile and connections deepened. By the late 2000s, she and Randy owned the Trump property, further solidifying their ties to Trump's inner circle. Then in July to August 2010, tabloids published intimate photos of White and evangelist Benny Hinn holding hands while they were in Rome. Benny. You guys remember old Benny Hinn, right? Good old Benny was still married, and so was she at the time, I believe. And they take one picture in Rome. Suffice it to say, neither one of them has owned up to they're coming out of the hotel together holding hands. But according to them, they're friends. Friends listen to Endless Love in the Dark, hold hands, and go on swanky trips to Rome together. Yeah, that happens. Though Hinn later insisted that it was only a friendship, rumors swirled, especially as the pair had reportedly been invited by Vatican officials as so-called patrons of the arts. So there are two Protestant people there and faith healers who've been invited by the Vatican to come out to Rome and give money to the church to become patrons of the arts. And suffice it to say, in summary, the Catholic Church says none of that happened. Nope, none of that happened. Tragedy struck in 2011 when Pastor Zachary Timms of New Destiny Christian Center died. White was tapped to replace him, a move met with resistance. Tim's ex-wife, Reva, sued to block the appointment, citing concerns about governance and White's controversial history. Though the lawsuit was later withdrawn, the dispute highlighted tensions within the predominantly Black congregation, igniting accusations of racial insensitivity and power grabs. In her personal life, White moved forward. She met and married Journey's keyboardist, Jonathan Cain, because they keep on believing. They don't stop believing. In April 2015, drawing headlines. At roughly the same time, she was quietly assembling evangelical leaders to rally behind Trump's emerging campaign in 2015. An image of influence and spiritual direction that positioned her as a bridge between church and politics. That alliance became public in 2016 when White chaired Trump's Evangelical Advisory Board and delivered the invocation at his January 2017 inauguration, becoming the first female clergy to do so. Hey, Donald, putting women where they belong, passing that mic. Good on you, Donnie. I have to throw them out little sound bites. I mean, I have dreams about ICE agents now. All right. And I am just brown enough for them to get away with it. All right. Just kidding. They can get away with it either way. But her prosperity gospel roots and past controversies invited criticism of her role at the intersection of faith and politics. White's White House profile soared in 2019 when the administration formally named her to lead the Faith and Opportunity Initiative. That's the new name of it. FOI. Her invocations grew trendier and more divisive, framing political issues in spiritual warfare terms. One June rally saw her praying against demonic networks. Later that year, she was officially making policy while simultaneously preaching. Controversy peaked in January 2020 when White offered a prayer asking for, quote, satanic pregnancies to miscarry, sending shockwaves through religious and public discourse. She defended the language as metaphorical, quote unquote, spiritual warfare. Then in November 2020, she live streamed a prayer calling for, quote, angels from Africa, quote, to help Trump win re-election. An image so surreal, it became the meme of the season. The culmination came on January 6, 2021. You guys remember January 6th, don't you? When White led the opening prayer at Trump's Ellipse rally, mere hours before the Capitol riot. That association with a moment of national crisis cemented her role as a lightning rod in the intersection of religion and politics. Her public presence quieted somewhat during the 2024 campaign cycle, though she remained identified with Trump's faith community. Then in February 2025, Trump appointed her to lead a newly revived White House faith office. By May, Politico and others were reporting that the office was striking a more overtly political tone, raising renewed concerns about church-state separation in Trump's second term. Maybe not the last. So, did you guys survive that? I mean, I tried to condense it down here, and there's a lot. There's a lot that I left out, Paula, when this comes back around to you. Paula has sued YouTubers and podcasters, or at least one content creator for being critical of her before. Paula, relax. Don't call lawyers. Let's talk it out. Come on the show. Did I get something wrong? I want to know. But look, there's a lot that Paula White a lot of flack that Paula White gets within her own community about the fact that she's been married 3 times, or maybe that her first marriage apparently was a shotgun wedding. But me personally, I don't believe in sin. So yeah, you get yours, right? And knocking boots with Benny Hinn, I'm not saying it happened. That's alleged. It might not have happened. I'm just gonna say. What? That is. It burns. It burns in my mind, my fragile mind, so sweet and innocent, just blemished, poisoned. But stop. No, Benny, don't do that. No, no. That's a daughter of God, Betty. Don't do that. No. It's not good. So let's watch a little bit of here. So let's go over some of this content and address some of these concerns. And after all, everyone's entitled to their concerns. Let's learn a little bit more about Paula White, who apparently is now a part of all of our lives.
Then he would have been sinful and he would not have been our Messiah.
Well, Paula White, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Years before he became.
Now, this is an interesting question, though, okay? Like I was saying before. So she makes the claim that Jesus would not be the Messiah if he were an undocumented immigrant, because undocumented immigrants are sinners. Now, I can understand that in a Mormon context, but very famously, Paula White, I saw her at least in one interview where she was asked, basically leading into the 2012 campaign, if the president of the United States were Mormon, would you support him like you do anybody else. And she very famously dodged the question. I mean, you can watch it for yourself, but I don't have it loaded up here because it's not that interesting. But it is interesting to note, at least, a Mormon candidate, like she stopped very short of saying that Mitt Romney was a Mormon, and that's apparently because she needs to maintain tight with people like Pastor Jeffries, the guy who raised concern that Christians maybe shouldn't vote for Mitt Romney because his church is not a true Christian church. But if Paula White is the standard and Benny Hinn is the standard of what a true Christian is, I mean, I don't know that Mitt Romney shouldn't be happy to avoid that labeling, right? I mean, but in any event, in Mormonism, there's a rule that says, shockingly enough, that we believe in honoring and sustaining the law of the land, abbreviated version, summarized, which is fantastically comical when you consider that it was Joseph Smith likely who wrote that. And Joseph Smith was a very bad boy. But there really isn't, I would say, any policy in Scripture, in the Bible, somebody pointed out to me one, that says that undocumented immigrants or anything like undocumented immigrants are sinners in just the very fact that they broke the law. I mean, the Bible is, replete cover to cover of instances where people are commanded to violate the laws, even violate God's law in order to abide by God's commandment. In other words, there are moments where you may actually have to break the law in order to do what is morally right. How are we getting this idea that Jesus, if he was a baby whose parents took him and fled to Egypt, supposedly to save him from a great massacre that, again, does not exist in any history outside of the Gospels, and that, to save his life, Jesus as a baby, as a child, would be this vile sinner just because he was an undocumented immigrant? It does seem to me like Paula's got a stretch to get anywhere near something logical there. It really just defies reason, in my opinion. But hey, what do I know? I'm a godless whore. I'm gonna remove this whole thing over here. Let's look a little
President, out of the blue, Donald Trump called Paula White Cain. He said she had the it factor. Now the two pray together in the Oval Office. It's the latest.
That was it factor, not ick factor. Before anybody gets started in the
Stop
comments.
in Paula's unlikely journey. And it all began when she was just a messed up girl from Mississippi.
Of where people of faith have been discriminated.
So this is getting to the next interview. So basically what got cut out there, I'm not going to waste your time with. Basically, there's these two narratives. One is that the revised version of Paula White, she really does seem to have taken a page out of the Joseph Smith playbook of, but this is just common. We saw this again with Nala Ray in the first episode that I did, the ex OnlyFans model. There's one version you tell to the sinner's church. There's one version you tell to the prosperous church that wants to believe that their pastors have never touched sin so deeply. And so you have these competing narratives, and the one that is the I was a vile sinner take, it usually tends to expose, in my experience, it tends to expose something more along the truthful way here. So basically this narrative, she tells us one story, Paula White does, that she was watching TV or that she was watching a sermon and that she felt touched by God, and etc. The other version that you get, if you get the longer version, is that she volunteered at church when she was married to her first husband. The church that she was volunteering at had this pastor by the last name of Wight. His first name's escaping me. He has a son who is very well known in the community to be a ladies' man, even though he is married. He even has, from what I understand, the rumor was that he had a passage, like a margin in his Bible, where he would have women sign with little messages to him, and that it was just understood that if your signature was in that Bible, in that Bible's margin, you were in his orbit. Should we say that? Should we say it that way? Yeah. And apparently Paula was in there. And but in any event, she winds up divorcing her husband. He ends up divorcing his wife, and they go off and they start over in another community. Now she says that in one interview that I saw that there was somebody who attacked a Christian in Florida, I believe, with gasoline, and she felt compelled to go out there and open a storefront church and start ministering. My understanding is it's not that way. What happened is she started teaching at a church school while her husband was working as a pastor at the church. And then while they were making, salary at this church in violation of their non-compete clause or their contract, their employment contract with that church, they went out and opened another church in town to compete with that church. As soon as that was brought to light, they were fired from that job and they started their new ministry. But apparently, they had the skills and or funds and or whatever the it factor is to get God's kingdom going again. So that's the truth about how they got into pastoring. And you can see why that's not for every audience. So fast forwarding here, this is them giving an interview with CBN about Jennifer Korn with Paula White Kane, talking about their new faith office in the new Trump administration.
Against, and where religion has been diminished by the government. So when we had the opportunity to come to the White House, the most amazing place as far as government goes for America, to be able to take on that mantle for other people of faith, to make sure that religious liberty and religious freedom are alive and well in America, there's no way you can turn that down.
President Trump made it clear during his inaugural address that he believes America needs religion and faith in God.
Okay. Call me a dirty heathen. Call me an apostate. Call me it again. To the best of my knowledge, the U.S. federal government has not caused pretty much anybody to lose their faith in God. I would say I have to make assumptions here. You leave us, ladies, to make assumptions. I'm going to go ahead and say you're talking about COVID restrictions. You're talking about people not being able to go to church. There does seem to have been wide reporting of people during the time when they didn't have to go to church, didn't feel obligated to show up at church every Sunday and do home church instead, have fallen out of love with God, or at least fallen out of love with religion. And that's very welcome news to me. First of all, good. I mean, look, if you can't sell them on your church from over a digital pulpit like this one, then maybe it's just not compelling. I mean, have you considered that? Maybe you just need you got to get out there and get a rebrand. People do it. You need to maybe get rid of this suffering Christ image. Get with the buddy Christ. Maybe just Christianity needs a rebrand. This fly. All right. So let's continue on a little bit. But I don't know that the government, I don't really see how the government is causing assault on anybody's faith unless they're going. I mean, the only thing we can only make assumptions when they leave the door open like this, is that since this new Trump administration has taken on, has come aboard, funding and policy surrounding science initiatives in the government has really suffered. We've seen as many as 47% of NASA's employees are leaving the administration to try and suffer and to try and survive as best they can with budget cuts. We're seeing significant rollbacks on EPA policies that are known to cause health problems, known to cause environmental harms to people. NIH policies. There are whole documents similar to the Voyager Declaration I've talked about in our series Non-Zero Chance, There are documents like that all over the government of federal employees signing these declarations stating that they're concerned about the safety of Americans, given all of the cuts and all of the regulation rollbacks. But I don't see that any of those things are necessarily directly related to Donald Trump saving Americans' faith. As far as I can tell, faith is still a crisis in America, if it ever was one. And we atheists, as I said before, many times, we're having a bit of a moment. Remember the Mormon moment? This is the atheist avalanche.
He followed that with an executive order establishing the White House Faith Office with the mission to assist faith-based entities in efforts to strengthen American families, promote work and self-sufficiency, plus protect religious liberty. That includes a force to address anti-Christian bias and acts of discrimination, such as the growth of anti-Semitism we've seen on college campuses. Attorney General Pam Bondi leads.
Okay. Anti-Semitism is ugly. Does it need to be said here? Can I just it says anti-Semitism is wrong. Don't hate on my Jewish friends and ancestors and family. Don't hate on anybody for being Jewish. That's wrong. It's wrong. Don't hate anybody for being Muslim. That's wrong. Don't hate anybody for being Arab. Don't hate anybody for being any race, ethnicity, or religious persuasion of any kind. Please don't. That's wrong. Don't invoke violence against people because of their beliefs or because of their ethnicity. That's wrong. We can all get on board with that. We can all get on one page here. I will mention that in history, there is never an instance where the government, where a central executive leader installs an office, a formal office of the government, to try and persuade people to go back to church. There's never such an instance where it is not fascist. This is tyrannical, if you will. There is no role in a modern secular society, and that is to say, not necessarily a godless society, but a society that respects that gods have no place in the governance of men, of human beings. Okay? In a secular society, in a modern secular world, everybody, if they want religious freedom, it benefits from secularism, benefits from a separation between church and state. So that's where I am. So in my opinion, Donald Trump and these esteemed ladies are wrong. If you want civil liberties, if you want liberty, religious freedom and religious liberty, I'm with you. The path forward to that is secularism, not necessarily atheism, but secularism, separation of church and state.
The task force and will work closely with the faith office.
And if a person wants to peacefully protest, that's one thing. But this has not been peaceful. It has been hateful. It has been hurtful. And it will not be tolerated by this president or his administration. And our office enforces that very strongly. I've known Attorney General Pam Bondi for over 20 years. She's a close friend. I'm honored. She's very smart. She's very strong. She's a strong Christian, and I'm honored to work with her, and for Jenny to work with her, and for us to work with the chief of staff, with president, and with all the agencies to make sure that there will be no bias. No.
Okay, if you want to talk about bias, we have to talk about scapegoating. Okay, scapegoating can oftentimes. I really should have combed my hair, but sometimes I just have to run. I just have to go. Sometimes you can see in the way somebody scapegoats who they want to criticize, and they'll put it out in an offhand comment. I don't have the clip put out here. I have actually seen the clip, or at least I've read it. Yeah, I read this one. I didn't find the video of it. I read this one where Paula White Kane was talking about anti-Christ movements in the political world and in the organizing arena. And as your resident Antichrist, I will say, let's go, Paula. You're talking about my people. Who are these Antichrists? Two of the organizations she mentions side by side in that comment. It was during a sermon, as I believe. I may be wrong about that, about being a sermon. It may have been in an interview. But she says the two organizations she mentions are the Ku Klux Klan and Black Lives Matter. Shall we put that right there in the let's have a talk part of the conversation about why a congregation that is predominantly made up of Black members and had a Black minister who died tragically just around the time of his divorce, and then came in and replaced him with this woman as their pastor. Now, I'm all for hiring practices with no religious tests, but one doesn't have to look very hard to say, could we not have found a Black pastor in the Black congregation, in the predominantly Black congregation? Couldn't we have found somebody who's from this church? What, instead of this woman whose whole past is embroiled in scandal and in misappropriation of funds? There's a mansion that apparently was paid for. It's like it was almost a $3 million mansion that apparently the mortgage was paid off by the church, and then they left that church. And it's like, okay, I guess that's just your business. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in salaries for nepotism, nepo babies and their family. I mean, it's like, okay, I can see why somebody would look at this and say, I don't know that this was the way forward, especially when you consider that Zachary Timms, he died in a very scandalous way, apparently. And you know, who knows whether or not it's true. I have legit concerns. Apparently it was in New York. Apparently he died of overdose and he had a white substance in his pocket. Okay, but it was in New York, so who's to say? But apparently he had a lot of problems. He may have been using. We don't really know what happened with that. But when you have those allegations and those rumors swirling around, for the board to come out and say, or that's what they call it, board of directors at this church, to say, let's get this white gal who's got like tons of controversy in her past to start pastoring this church. It's comments like these that make me think, yeah, I would, like, if I were attending there, and I don't, I'm not a Jesus person, I'd have concerns here.
No discrimination, nothing hateful or hurtful against people. Christians around the world are persecuted. And so we know the hot spots, we know the places, and we're very on this and working diligently to make sure that our government works with other governments and does what is necessary.
The Faith Office invited numerous leaders to the White House to discuss.
I just have to mention this because it's timely. In this day and age, it's just been in the past week or so that we have seen some persecution of Christians. Don't persecute these Christians. You know, that just gives them more to lob at the rest of us. Don't persecute Christians. Just leave their congregations and see the light of reason. But the interesting thing here is that in Palestine and Israel, however you want to draw those lines, and boy, I'd say if you had to draw a line between Palestine and Israel, take my advice and don't. But the Orthodox Christians churches, as I see it, are largely on what is traditionally considered the Palestinian side, and that's a curious problem in a country that does have, or there are quite a few Jewish extremists. That's not all Jews. Not all Jews are extremists, just like not all Christians are extremists. I'm just disclosing that. But there are settlers in Israel that have been slowly displacing people who are not Jewish in these communities, and Christians are among them. And so there are people in these Christian churches who are appealing, even Christian preachers, these Orthodox preachers, who are saying these guys, they don't care who they hurt. And there are these ancient churches, these old Orthodox churches that are suffering damage, and that the people are afraid because they're seeing basically riots and extremism growing in the area. So I'm just going to say, for people who want to say, oh, we're fortunate to have a faith office that is now doing its best to prevent Christians from being persecuted, you could look to Israel and ask yourself, is Bibi Netanyahu an ally? I'm not saying he is or isn't. I don't weigh in on political matters, but there you go.
Issues and policies affecting faith communities nationwide. Some leaders have also met and prayed with the president in the Oval Office. When you talk to him, does he take time out to pray?
Absolutely, often, or even without a briefing or a meeting. For me personally, a 24-year relationship, I'll just feel led to pray, and I'll say, can I pray for you, sir? And he's now grown accustomed to laying hands on him and praying over him and praying the word.
The main office operates in the West Wing of the White House. They say his goal is to see all Americans get beyond their differences.
Okay. Don't love that. I got no reason I can think of in the world why the White House, the West Wing, or any part, even the basement, needs a place for people who work on faith initiatives to be working from an official seat of government. If they want to go out there and overcome the barriers that divide people who are, these various religious backgrounds, they have the platform, they have television, they have the internet, they have shit tons of money, they have everything they need to accomplish it. Institutionalizing it with the government is not helping anyone. Coordinating it with the government is not doing anything except for solidifying this idea under the MAGA brand that Donald Trump is bringing people back into the pews of church. And I will say this, not only does that worry me, that's dangerous for the community and it's dangerous for us as a people, it's dangerous for Trump, because what if he doesn't do it? And I don't see any proof that he is doing it. Someone tell me otherwise.
Find common ground through the power of faith. Jenny Korn say beyond their role as leaders of the White House Faith Office, they share a hope for America. That is to truly understand that America was founded on the principles of God.
Them to stand.
Okay, and now we're just going to go back. We're going to ponder some of how we got here. So that was just recently, that interview. I just want to clarify again. Sure, there were godly people at the start of America. One of them, very famously, was Patrick Henry. Mr. Give me liberty or give me death. Very few people know that sermon was about killing the slaves. And that Thomas Jefferson was often quoted as a godly man, unless you ask certain people. There are certain Christians who still today find out that the Jefferson Bible, which was not called the Jefferson Bible, it was called the Morals and Teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, in which Thomas Jefferson took an empty journal and then took a razor blade and took pieces of the Bible in English, French, German, and Greek, and took basically the red letters, the teachings of Jesus, the red letters of the Bible before they were printing it in red letters, as far as I know anyway, and copying and pasting it in there. It actually is fairly innocent in there if you consider that, oh no, he was just trying to make like an annotated Bible, or he was trying to make a Bible, whatever the cross language reference, the word comes out like a correlated Bible of just the teachings of Jesus. That doesn't mean that that's all that he believes in the Bible, that he doesn't believe any of the miracles of Jesus, until you read the letters that Thomas Jefferson wrote, in which he said that he looked forward to a day when the idea of Jesus being generated in the womb of a virgin would be regarded with the same level of skepticism as Minerva being generated in the brain of Jupiter. It's like, oh my. Or where he called John Calvin an atheist. We are making friends. And then went on to say, or rather, he is a demonist, and said if anybody worshipped a false god, if anybody worshipped I think a false god, he had said false god or he said devil, it was Calvin. And he said that to John Adams, who, of course, provoked him to say it in a letter. This is their famous letter exchange where John Adams wrote to him and said, "You and I ought not to die before we explain ourselves to one another." It's actually a very interesting exchange of letters. You can buy, there are books about it. There's a book about it, as far as I know, but you can just look them up. You can actually read the letters. And these men wrote, these two presidents wrote to each other about every topic under the sun, it seems, and religion was a big part of it, and whether or not they were both old and they were both waiting to die, and these two men parsed out their difference of belief in universalism and so forth, and it was pretty good. And then you see again in his letters that Thomas Jefferson referred to this book, the Jefferson Bible, by saying that the process of taking these clips, the red letter teachings of Jesus, in French, English, Greek, and German, if I'm not mistaken, and pasting them into this journal, was a process not unlike taking diamonds from dunghills. Dunghills. So I can see how a Christian might take a man, Mr. endowed by their creator with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, say, maybe this isn't quite the Christian we thought he was, when he talks about the teachings of Jesus as diamonds plucked out of shit heaps. That, I can get it. I see where you're coming from there. Was he wrong? That's a conversation that we ought to have. But in any event, so while that's happening, well, I'm off on this tangent about this. They were saying that this country was founded on godly principles. We'll remind you that Mr. Give me liberty, ask for me, give me liberty, give me death. Thomas Jefferson stood up and stormed out in that conference. People talked about it on that speech, because it was about putting down a slave revolt before it began, before the English would arrive, by basically euthanizing their own slaves. And you can look at it two ways. One, Thomas Jefferson thought that was just inappropriate because these are human beings. Two, the man did own close to 1,000 slaves. So, you look at it multiple ways. The man certainly was not perfect. In fact, he's kind of an a-hole in a lot of ways. He was not that great of a man. But to say that all men who were found at the beginning of the American movement were equally godly men is certainly not true. I will remind you again, as needs to be done, of flawed human beings, but certainly Christians, that there were. You have George Washington, who famously one day who wouldn't take communion. Now, speculation is that he didn't take communion at church because he had these false teeth and it hurt his mouth to chew, and it was embarrassing for him to chew in public. Who's to say? But that the story goes that one day he went home after listening to the pastor exhort to repentance those who stayed for the sermon but then didn't come down to the altar to receive communion with everybody else, and after that didn't return to church. And so he would send Martha and the children. And so the same man, though, in multiple occasions referred to his belief in God. I would say it was a deistic belief, but I will take George Washington at his word that flawed man that he was. He was very flawed. But he was but that he does seem to be pretty consistent in his belief that God exists, and that even that providence, God expressed his will among human beings through acts of providence. So there's one, and a fairly good one. But I would say that I will remind you again that this same man would have common sense read to the troops to boost their morale. Common sense makes total sense. Makes total sense to read common sense to boost morale of the troops during the Revolutionary War, because it was very well written by a man who called out organized religion, Mr. Thomas Paine, who then wrote The Age of Reason, which I have now become thoroughly convinced, if I needed any convincing, embarrassed slightly to admit that it hadn't fully landed for me until my friend Kobe Reddish pointed it out to me, said, you know, that Joseph Smith had access to a copy of The Age of Reason when he was writing the Book of Mormon. And I said, sure, or translating the Book of Mormon. And I said, sure, yeah, no, I know that. And I'm like, which is amazing because The Age of Reason is a remarkable document. And he said to me in a Facebook message one day, he said, that it's Korihor. And I went, well, I've often thought about, holy crap, Kobe. Holy crap. How are you holy crap. You're not wrong. You are not wrong. Holy crap. Thomas Paine is Korihor. I love it. So right now, I'll let you in on a little peek. Those of you who are close to our fellowship or care about our fellowship, this spiritual community we call the Church of Korihor. I am working on the process of kind of systematizing our website. Friends out there who I already have people, since we launched the new website, which is a bitchin' new look. I already have people using our volunteer and luminary applications to be ordained as luminaries or to become volunteers in our missions. I'm super excited about it. I'm very disappointed with myself that I haven't got all the technical aspect. A lot of this I'm having to hard code into our website. So please be patient while we update. But suffice it to say, we are organizing the Church of Korihor to be more systematic and to have things like an actual canon that will be searchable, that will be indexable, in which we, people, when they search about the church, the canon of the Church of Korihor, they will be able to search it just like you can search like the Bible or the Book of Mormon or the Quran online. You'll be able to search the Church of Korihor's canon, and I'm super excited about it. So far, we have canonized one story that is formerly Alma chapter 16 from the Book of Mormon, now in public domain, now is canonized because that is the story of Korihor, who, now that I realized, is Thomas Paine. I've gone back to the idea that I have had for a while now, that we need to get that we need to canonize the Age of Reason. So I had that and a few other things lined up. I still have to figure out the technical side of how we're doing this, but I do think that between here and the end of the year, we will canonize the Age of Reason. So the Age of Reason, I mean, in and of itself, it's been pointed out to me once in a conversation I had with Mike Huckabee. Yeah, truth, on Facebook. But who pointed out to me that he said, Thomas Paine was not an atheist. You guys still with me? He said that Thomas Paine was not an atheist. And that I said, what are you talking about? First of all, I didn't make the claim he was an atheist. I definitely made the claim that he was a godless person. He said Thomas Paine was a deist. I mean, I don't know of any instances in which Thomas Paine deliberately called out belief in God as being stupid or untrue. So, I mean, I guess you can make that claim. So I suppose I can make that fair enough. But it's pretty clear to me, I think, that of your agnostics out there, Thomas Paine was one of the more notable ones. So, anyways, to say that this country was founded purely by godly people is, first of all, to take out the many myriad sins of these men, and largely men. It is to overlook the terrible injustice and genocide of countless, literally unnumbered numbers of indigenous peoples on this continent over the course of hundreds of years, and still ongoing, frankly. And if those are Christian efforts, they certainly were billed frequently as Christian, as trying to modernize or trying to civilize cultures of people, of indigenous people, as they always have been whenever that rubric has been used. And that much of the progress of America built on this continent was built on the back of the Catholic doctrine of discovery, which basically, if you don't know, there were papal edicts, papal bulls, specifically authorizing that any good Catholic ruler was in their God-given right to take any wealth, land, or territory, or lives, or slaves of people who were not Christians. So, I mean, or more to wit, Catholics, precisely. And so, the estimates on how many indigenous peoples on these continents perished by genocide just because of the doctrine of discovery, it's literally not known. But estimates have put it at over 100 million in some cases. Some as few as, I think the lowest number I've seen is something like 10 million. At the conservative estimates, more indigenous people were killed in the doctrine of discovery than during the Holocaust, by far. Well, at least by Germany. So it's like, this is how terrible this thing was. And yes, the worst parts of it were done in the name of God, the worst parts. And so it does make sense to me that, again, Thomas Jefferson, flawed man that he was the man who wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, in which he said that it was to protect the Jew, the Mohammedan, which is a very antiquated word for Muslim, and the Hindu, he misspelled Hindu in his notes, and the infidel of every denomination. That this document that was the precursor to the First Amendment, set from the beginning of this nation that the only way to protect people of all faith is to protect everyone, including atheists, and say that government should not intervene. Let faith run its course on its own, because as soon as the government starts authorizing somebody to give preference to one group over another, something bad is going to happen. Let's watch this a little bit before we move on here. Oh my goodness, already an hour. I want you to see this. Okay, so this is backtracking a little bit. This is November 6th, 2020. This is the night that Joe Biden won the election. And this is the prayer. I want you to see the ending here of the prayer that Paula White is giving. Remember, this is COVID, so everybody's at home, everybody's zooming in, and they have all of these Christian leaders. I'm not really sure how many of them are pastors, but some of them I'm sure are just donors. If you guys see some faces that you recognize and want to call out, you're welcome to. You'll get a chance to see them when it goes to the big view. But basically, Paula White, in her official capacity as a spiritual advisor to Donald Trump and the head of the faith office for the first Trump administration, is here to pray as they're counting the. It's not the night that he won the election, I should say. It's the night that they're counting the ballots. So anyway.
And watch, guard God.
We thank you for ministering angels going to POTUS right now and to Vice President, to their family, to the attorneys, to everyone who is on the front line fighting this battle, to the prophets, to the apostles, to those that stand in the gap and make up the hedge, to the intercessors. And we ask that your army arise, for Isaiah chapter 60 says, arise and come into your being. Arise, come into your being, for the glory of the Lord has arisen. For God, your purpose is great, and that is Habakkuk. Habakkuk declares in chapter 2, verse 14, that the knowledge of the glory of your name shall cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. We know that the usherance and the timing, for remember, that seasons are regulated by purpose, and this is your time for a great awakening. This is your time for great revival. This is your time to strengthen the kingdom of God. This is your time for the kingdom of God and the church to be fortified. For when we do face the darkest days, the perilous time, and that spirit of Antichrist is released in its fullness, the church will be ready in every way. So let everything that fundamentally and foundationally that must be established in Jesus' name. And we put a hedge of protection around POTUS. We put a wall of fire around President Donald Trump right now. We thank you. God, give him sweet rest. And let him not fight the battle in his own strength. But let him recognize.
Before we get to the end of this, this is pretty. Blah, blah, blah. Let's just say that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Me to tell people all the time to
give him sweet rest is probably not the language I would have used in future. For future inspired praying, Paula, give him sweet rest sounds like a threat. But anyways, don't threaten him. Nobody threatened this man. See, he is our leader. He is our elected president. Please let us have decorum. Let us have respect. Let us not have violence. No matter what Paula White calls for. It's just a joke. It's a joke, Paula, when you send this to the attorneys. Don't do. No general counsel needed. We can talk it out. We're a bunch of adults. But shoot, now I lost my track of where I wanted to go with that. But in any event, oh yes. Now I know. Okay, so I wanted to show you this. I'm going to find this real quick while we let her finish praying here.
Thank them
Pray to the Lord.
for the multitudes of millions of people that are praying for this nation, praying for righteousness, praying for him, praying for his family. God, we thank you that this nation will not succumb to wickedness, but you will mock, you will laugh, you will mow down those that work in wickedness, as your word says. So we stand on Psalm chapter 2 and so much of your word that you hear and answer our prayers, and we praise you, we worship you in Jesus' mighty name.
Sorry, Ken. In any event, so we're getting to this. Do you see this here? We're gonna see all the people who are involved in this call right now. Okay, it's on this Zoom call, praying to the Lord to infuse Donald Trump with angels, with the ministry of angels, and build a hedge around him of protection. Could have used that in a few instances. I mean, he does have Secret Service protection. That should be plenty. But we don't have to bring up any of that. But it's interesting how she again multiple times. This is the danger for me, is that you have a person who has an official job with the government, who we know has apparently been given training on what constitutes a conflict of interest. When you do work in faith, we understand that, we respect that. You have to make money on your own time, your own dime, fine, whatever you have to do. But then you have your role in the government. And this again, this similar positions, I would argue to you, are not the same, but a similar position existed in the Obama administration. I don't like that either. And it certainly, and it started with the W administration. Definitely, that definitely adds up. Don't like that either. In fact, I was still technically a professing Mormon when I voted for when I voted for George Bush in 2004. Don't judge me, okay? I've had a rough life. I did. I voted for Bush, and I regret it. I regret it often. I regret it often. Not that I would eventually become the blue dog who was going to throw Arizona, to John Kerry, but I do wish I had used my vote differently in that instance. But at the time I was this closet atheist. I didn't want to tell anybody that I lost my faith in God 3 years before, and while missionary in Peru. But that's neither here nor there. But you have this now 20 years of having a person in the White House whose job it is to coordinate between religious NGOs and secular NGOs. And now you've got this person who's in charge of it in this new office, in Trump's newly named version of this office, who is out here talking about Trump being the fulfillment of prophecy in the Old Testament and being the fulfillment of prophecy in the New Testament. And that is a different thing. We know that she should know better. And the only thing I'm left to conclude is that she just doesn't care. And that's a problem. And that she can just get away with it. I've told the story in previous instances before we get to the end of this. Well, let me have her talk a little bit more. Then I'll mention that again.
Amen. Thank you so much. If I could just say one more time to everyone who's listening, Paula White has paid a profound personal price to lead us during this season. I won't say more, don't need to focus on more, but the price she has paid has been beyond what any of us can imagine in a whole arena of life. Paula, we are immensely grateful, and we pray supernatural protection of Almighty God upon you, blessings upon you, and the protection of Almighty God to surround you in this season and going forward.
Everybody get your faith battles out.
Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray. Amen.
Okay, done and done. So, interesting, right? I wanted to pull this up. I couldn't find the actual X. I have it saved on my phone somewhere. And I think that's dead now. But in any event, there was an actual ethics lawyer who had worked in the Bush administration back when this office first began. And this ethics lawyer, presumably Republican, I mean, he did work for Bush. I don't know. I'm not in charge of monitoring her, and I wish I had his name pulled up on my notes here. I was doing research on my phone, doing research on my computer, trying to throw it all together and ask ChatGPT, reword this so that it makes sense. But this ethics lawyer, this part didn't get correlated into it, but this ethics lawyer has been tweeting about saying Paula White is out there running her religious Ponzi scheme from the White House. I mean, this is a guy who worked for Bush. This is a guy who worked in a Republican administration as the ethics lawyer. If there's any charges to come out of it, I am going to Obama that flag. If there are any charges to come out of it or anything like this, I would be very surprised. Basically, the fear right now in the institutions of the halls of power in our government is that if you can throw faith on the label of it, you can get away with it, and you can get anywhere you want with it. This is why it is more important than ever that we have institutions that are built on the structure of this church narrative. That's why we need the Satanic Temple. That's why we need the Divine Assembly. That's why we need Oasis. That's why we need Thrive. That's why we need the Church of Korihor. Is because these are now I've said again and again, churches like the Church of Korihor are the most powerful institutions in America, and so arguably potentially the most powerful institutions in the world. When Paula White, left her church, her old church, it was $29 million in debt. Buildings falling down, basically, from what I saw in the news reports I saw on it. It was in really bad shape. And she runs off. She takes off to her new ministry, takes off allegedly with $500,000 worth of audiovisual equipment, starts another church, and leaves the people in the church behind with sour taste in their mouth. They got left holding the bag when this church, this enormous church they built, was left high and dry. That's when it started to come out that apparently, allegedly, this is as reported, her husband would authorize paying off her Amex card. Oh. You and me, Obama, I knew it. Her paid off her Amex card instead of making payroll. This is a church that was making millions of dollars in donations. Paid off her home. Apparently made payments, rent payments to her for her to live and her husband in Trump Tower. And she talks about, Donald Trump called me one day and said, you got the it factor. Is this before or after you bought a condo in Trump Tower? This prosperity gospel thing gets really out of hand, and it's frightening. And if you think it's just Paula White, you would be, you'd be surprised. Even Mormonism, which apparently I follow Rebecca Biblioteca pretty closely. Anybody else out there following Mormonish podcast? I don't necessarily follow the podcast itself. I don't have a lot of time, shockingly, to listen to ex-Mormon podcasts. But Rebecca, luckily, does TikToks and tweets and things. I believe this was a post on Facebook or something. I remember. Anyways, I read it. Apparently, the Mormon Church, as of now, is telling members to start referring to Relief Society as women's group, to primary as children's group. I'm not really sure why they don't call it ministry, women's ministry. I guess because they already have a ministering service now. It seems to me more consistent to call it women's ministry. Or was it the tweets? Yeah. And to call sacrament meeting Sunday worship, which is blowing my mind right now. For the first time in this recent year, couple years, Jacob Hansen, been on the show, guest of the show. I don't know that he calls me a friend. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. And that's fine. That's about the right place for us. Jacob Hansen saying that the church, is making decisions that are trying to appeal more to broad Christianity, and raising concerns about that in the Mormon Church. I look at that and I say, I say that's now officially valid. When they changed you start to change the language, it has an impact. It's not nothing. It's not just nomenclature. Changing the language changes the culture. And one of the things that we have seen surviving into Mormonism's declaration that they are the Church of Jesus Christ, which, by the way, again, apparently some notices are going out. As my understanding is, there are more local edicts going out, like area edicts or stakes. Somebody out there who knows it. Again, I got this from Rebecca Biblioteca. Is getting the goods. She is getting the goods right now, right? Stating that you can start referring to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as simply the Church of Jesus Christ. Wow. I mean, we are seeing the church get bold. We've seen the Mormons get bold in the age of Trump. So we'll see where it goes with that. But in any event, the thing that's interesting to me is to see that this narrative about teaching poor people to pay their tithing first continues. I didn't get to load it up here, and I'm not going to get a chance before we're done. This woman, Paula White, got up on her program. I watched it. I don't have it queued up to show you, but take my word for it. You can look it up. Look up Paula White asks her supporters to give her a month of their salary, and it's there. This woman got on television and and they call it the first fruits doctrine. Hey, MB, you and I need to talk. MB, my email at the Church of Korihor is not working right now. your communication has been received. Let's talk, because I'm excited about this. That's between me and MB. Given that MB is who I think you are. But this prosperity gospel is just getting disgusting, and it's becoming widespread. It is indeed like a Ponzi scheme. And it's frustrating to me on two counts. One, because the Church of Korihor is very poor. I just barely launched, by the way, on the website. I'm just going to mention it casually, since everybody apparently is hawking their spiritual wares, that I have created because there were complaints. There's a need for a little more funding at the Church of Korihor so that we can cover some expenses that are coming up, and so we can maximize the work. And then there's also people who don't want to sign up at the Church of Korihor if it's a monthly contribution of $2. So I combined those requests into, you can now become a sponsoring contributor of the Church of Korihor. You can find it, the join tab there at the Church of Korihor. I'm going to have to make sure that's working right now. And yes, you can upgrade if you're already a contributor to a sponsoring contributor for an annual contribution of $48 a year. So, and if I could get a few people to sign up for that, it would really help us out. When this channel was a true crime channel, when Hellfire Agency was just a fledgling little true crime channel that nobody was really paying much attention to, we had 100, 200, 300 followers. We went up to over 700 followers on YouTube after a couple of months where I just threw a couple $100 at YouTube, at Google, to promote some of our YouTube shorts. Our shorts took off. I mean, especially, which at that point was only hymns. There was the Friedenka hymn took off over 100. We got thousands and thousands of views. Tons of people interested in the Church of Korihor for a couple $100 a month. If I could get 4 or 5 people to become sponsoring contributors every single month, we could keep that thing rolling, and we could keep this work going, because we're about to accelerate the work. We're accelerating to a new program I've mentioned before, where we're going to start feeding seniors. And we're, of course, about to kick off. It's about hot as hell right now. We are going to kick off Rapture soon to start distributing blankets to the to whatever unsheltered persons we can find anymore. Even here in Utah, it's becoming difficult to find them because they're having to hide. They're hiding from law enforcement raids already, even outside of DC. So, the work is going to get big, and more than money, what we really need is time. What we really need are people. And so we've created a new position in the Church of Korihor, which is volunteer. Unlike luminaries, you don't have to go through a background check to be a volunteer. But you won't have the same, capacity to represent the church, officiate ceremonies and so forth. But we do need luminaries. So we need more clergy. We need more volunteers. In any event, this woman, Paula White, you see if my pitch sounds different from hers. She came out there and said that, God expects more than tithing. Tithing, which she says is 10% of your gross income. Boy, you're going to piss off a Mormon with that. No. You don't tithe on the government's money. That in addition to that, it was in January in 2018, she asked her supporters to send her their first day or their first week or their first month's salary to sustain her ministry. Just about the most ridiculous thing. I mean, it becomes a very clear grift. But she promises them that you'll get, she frequently mentions these 7 blessings. If she asks them for, I've seen her ask for like $113, $1148, or like $1,143. She's asked for $113. She asks people, and she's like, if you sow this seed right now, the Spirit of God is telling me that you'll get 7 blessings. And then she'll go, and the blessings are broad, and it feels like a Ponzi scheme. It feels like it slices, it dices, it blah, 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 blah. And it gets to a point now where I have to look around and say, are we exclusively institutionalizing people who sell faith for money? is this exclusively a nation where we have no respect for anything except for the worship of mammon? And if that is the case, why should we godless people be left out and laid out as if we are the enemy? I've said before, and I will say again, that I think it despicable that anybody would initiate violence against somebody because of their religious background. Don't anybody within the sound of my voice, don't do it. I will say again, I will say this, as I stated earlier on Facebook. Some of you are my friends on Facebook. You may have seen this. I published about this on the Church of Korihor's Facebook page, that we have launched our standards, clergy standards of conduct, for the first time this just last night. I published it last night, and in there I personally wrote it, that we expect at the Church of Korihor that our clergy are mandatory reporters. That is to say, if you have reasonable suspicion and proof of, and we don't take confession, we will be beginning a program before the end of the year of spiritual directorship. So that's not confession, but it could be something where something is confided and where it will have to be disclosed to everybody who comes under spiritual directorship at the Church of Korihor, which we plan to, by the way, have qualified spiritual directors. Think somebody like Britt Hartley. I'm not saying Britt's going to join us. I'm not saying she's not. I haven't talked to Britt about it. But I'm saying somebody like that, okay? I'm not talking necessarily strictly like me or like we're going to start at. I expect people to get trained in doing this and find people who have training in this, atheist spiritual directors. We need everybody to be clear that if you have reasonable suspicion or confession, a good solid reason to believe that in your care, in your pastoral care, somebody is committing physical or sexual abuse of a minor or of a vulnerable person, you are to report it to the police within 24 hours. It's a very important factor for me as an ex-Mormon, and I know a lot of ex-Mormons out there, and I help a lot of people of conscience out there, because right now the Mormon Church is embroiled in a scandal where out of thousands of pending and or reported claims about clergy in the Mormon Church covering up the abuse of minors, the church is maintaining its position and even has at the FAIR conference, which is not officially connected to the Mormon Church, but is the main apologetic arm, the de facto apologetics arm of the Mormon Church, is now defending that the best thing that we can do, that they can do, is to oppose mandatory reporting of assault. And because people get more care, that people get better care within the church and with ecclesiastical leaders in the church calling a hotline that traditionally, up until now, as far as I am aware, up until now, maybe still continuing now, rings directly to a law firm here in Salt Lake City, Curtin McConkie, that represents the church. That is, that represents the general counsel of the church, rather than reporting to law enforcement. Now we have instances and reports of people from all over this country, who knows where else around the world, where the church was complicit in the abuse of minors going back decades. And in some cases, I got another one. And in some cases, that it was known by the ecclesiastical leaders the whole time. In some instances where the bishop or stake president or somebody in the ecclesiastical line of authority said, I don't feel right about this. We can't just not report this to the police. What if he continues to do it? What if they continue to cause this harm? And in those instances, quite often, if it's overlooked once, it gets overlooked again and again. And so, look, as far as I know, the Church of Korihor is the first organization I know of, this atheist church, that, and I know this is going to sound a little sermony. Well, we'll see. Yeah, it's very, yeah. And you want to take bets, right? You want to take bets how that's going to go? Sorry, friends who are just listening. MB makes us a comment here. Going to hike it all the way to the SCOTUS, doubling down. That's right. That's where it's going. This is that they're starting to pass laws. I don't know if you heard about the story, those of you out there. It really gets it really gets to me, and I hate to bring the spirit down on this, the mood down in this broadcast. It really gets to me that in the same swath of policymaking, which a state senator, the head of the state senate here in Utah, is accused of actually changing the law on what constitutes the assault of a minor, essay of a minor. So that if the assailant is in high school, then they are guilty of a misdemeanor rather than a felony, while a member of his family allegedly was embroiled in just such an instance, where a high school senior assaulted a child in middle school or somewhere in that age. And it's like, and that instead of being a felony, it's now a misdemeanor. I can comprehend totally saying that there needs to be Romeo and Juliet laws that say we understand teenagers, boyfriend and girlfriend, don't deserve to have their whole lives destroyed by the fact that they fooled around. But this is not that, right? And laws are passed with sober heads when there are not conflicts of interest. That's when it's best to pass a law. If you are personally engaged and embroiled in a scandal of this kind, it doesn't make sense for you to lead in getting such a law passed. Now, in the same swath of laws being passed here in this country, they're passing laws to say that 14-year-olds can be married. And because, and it's, of course, being drummed up to say, of course, they always push for this. They always push for that. Some 14-year-olds are just asking to get married. For what? To get married, and should be considered adults making that decision. Why? Because then right at the Epstein file thing, right the same time as this, we are now seeing where there is a movement to roll out a path forward for the abuse of minors under the rubric that God wants some kind of forgiveness to be possible for people who falter into sin, while also not allowing, people who are intersex to compete in the sport of their gender expression, while not allowing trans people to use the public restroom that corresponds to their identity and expression and their gender. And it's like, very passionate about where trans people pee, not so much about if this 18-year-old marries a 14-year-old, is the 14-year-old a sinner with whatever happens after they're married. And it's just, we're seeing how family values under this faith-directed policy making are panning out. It's panning out like exactly the kind of thing that somebody who promised to release the Epstein files and then reneged on it would want. And there I've said a thing. And it's not about who you vote for. Vote for who you want. Vote for the policy you want. Honestly, I don't feel confident that any political leader is the solution to anybody's problems. I've given up on gods and governments a long time ago. But I am looking at the policy making that's happening now. I'm saying we have a place as people of conscience in this society to stand up and say, we believe in separation of church and state for a reason. And it's no party. Democrats are guilty of it. Republicans do it too. Okay. But what we believe in is secularism. One of the 12 values of Korohorism is secularism. Yes. How can that be a religious value? It's a religious value in that we believe that people should stand up for their political beliefs and their moral beliefs on moral basis that has nothing to do with obeying God or obeying the church, and has nothing to do with enforcing or preferring one religious group over any other group. And that has nothing to do with getting political office because you're a member of that religious group. And I say it for Korah whores. I will never in my life endorse a Korah whore for any office. That, even though one of the promises, by the way, when Donald Trump was running for office, and I'm not saying this against him, I'm just saying this is a matter of history. When he was running for office in 2015 and 2016, that cycle, you remember well, he promised that he would do his best to reverse the Johnson Amendment. That is to say, the Johnson Act. Anyways, the Johnson Amendment, yeah, where it's not a constitutional amendment. It's a law that says that churches can lose their tax-exempt status and pastors can cost their churches their tax-exempt status if they endorse political candidates or become too politically connected. And he did that. He passed, or he signed an executive order significantly curtailing the enforcement of the Johnson Amendment. But then not that it even made a difference, because now the IRS this year has stated in court cases that they haven't enforced it really at all ever, which is true. No church has ever lost its tax exempt status because of their political leanings. And some of us have specific examples where that might have been applied. Now, these last week we talked about Josiah Trenum proudly standing before the World Congress of Families, an organization that's been labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, by the way. This Eastern Orthodox preacher, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the comments on that going wild with people saying, don't pick on us. Go back to your Mormons. We Christian Orthodox people, we don't deserve any of your scrutiny. It's like, no, guess what? I'm bringing it to the evangelicals. Just wait until I bring it to a Scientologist. Just these coming weeks they're going to be hot. I'm going to come back for you Mormons. Believe you me, you charlatans are going to get it. But you better believe I got Scientologists on this list. You better believe that I've got some Orthodox rabbis on here. I've got charlatans to call out. When God is used to dictate policy, religious liberty ceases to exist. That's always going to be the case. And I believe very firmly that we will only march forward into a future where people can believe or disbelieve according to the dictates of their conscience. When this vile faith office instituted in this instance is disbanded and officially renounced from ever being applied in government again, I can't tell you what policies to write or to push for or to vote for, but I will tell you in my heart of hearts, if I could live in a country where I believed I am free, such an office would not exist now. It would never exist again in the future. And certainly not under the direction of a woman who tells her faithful throng to send her $3,000 to sow a seed of prosperity. But again, if it wasn't Paula White, what if it was David A. Bednar? Would it be different? What if it was Josiah Trenum? What if it was Franklin Graham? I gotta be honest with you, Franklin Graham. I almost did today's Charlatan of the Week on Franklin Graham, because to talk about a man who, I mean, Billy Graham was not. Billy Graham was no saint. He had problems. There were issues, and people in this country worship him way too much. But Billy Graham never did anything like this that I know of. Maybe somebody can call me out and tell me differently. Franklin Graham is here for the Christian nationalism movement, and I cannot imagine a more vile betrayal of the trust of the faithful than some of the things that Franklin Graham has been out there pushing lately. I expected it from Kirk Cameron. I expected it from Paula White. I expected it from some of these bad actors. When I saw how badly Franklin Graham started going after Chip and Joanna Gaines for having a gay couple on their show, I said, this guy is losing context. This guy's losing it, and he's starting to show their true colors in a way that I never thought that Franklin Graham was quite his father. But I definitely don't see anything virtuous in this Christian behavior in this man now. And so I'm looking at this and thinking to myself recently, we have lived to see the ennobling of this of Christian nationalism in a very, very disgusting way. Oh, don't get me started. Here's the funny no, don't get me started about Jerry Falwell Jr. I didn't like his dad. Frankly, I think that Jerry Falwell Jr. suffers under the weight of his father's reputation. Anyways, the funny thing is that no, we don't even have time for it. We'll do Jerry Falwell another time. Good old Jerry and Becky. I don't know them. But I will close up with this. I want to tell you one more time this story, okay? I said before, and I feel like I say it all the time now, people really need to know the story of Max Sievers. I need to know it better. I've actually got a friend, I don't know if she's out there, I've been asking, hey, do you go, who just moved to Germany? And I said, while you're out there, I can't find books about Max Sievers here in the States, like for anything. I might wind up buying a couple of them. It's like $100 shipping to get them over from Switzerland, to get them in German so I can read them and get them translated. The books written by and about Max Sievers. So there's only so much information about him online. And I've gone through, I'm pretty sure, all of it. Max Sievers was the head of the German Freethinkers League in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, who fled to Belgium, who saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of atheists and agnostics, more than 500,000 atheists and agnostics in Germany, Austria, under the Nazi regime. And it was arrested by the Gestapo, was beaten, released by some stroke of luck early in the regime. And because he destroyed all their records, all the records that he couldn't move to Belgium, of all of the newsletter holders and contributors to the German Freethinkers League, when the Reichstag fire happened in Berlin, that led to the assumption of power under a central authority. And they took Freethinkers Hall, which was a beautiful building in Berlin. I'm pretty sure it still stands. I've seen pictures of it anyway. This beautiful building in Berlin where they would get together and they would sing and they would have meetings, and they would hear basically what the equivalent of what we call godless sermons in the Church of Korahor. They were very much like the Church of Korahor. And when Hitler rose to power, Max Sievers knew they were coming for him. They were coming for the atheists. And so he got everything moved out of the country. Luckily for him, his wife had family in Belgium. And when they raided the hall, Freethinkers Hall, the SA raided Freethinkers Hall, they were looking for the names of these atheists and agnostics all over Germany, and they were gone. And they took possession of Freethinkers Hall and created an office for faith for the Nazi regime. And I think about it every day now. There is no instance where a government does this for a purpose other than tyranny. And Max Sievers spoke out while Martin Niemöller was a Christian preacher who didn't know he would spend most of the war in a concentration camp. At that same time period that Max Sievers was out there saying, we have to stop this, printing books from Belgium about why we have to fight to resist, why you must resist, and also why he believed in Soviet-style socialism. But that's another story. And here you have this guy out there fighting in the resistance. Then you had Martin Niemöller out there behind the pulpit preaching for the regime until they started saying, until he found out that the regime was planting party agents in every church, in the among the Lutherans, among the Protestants. At that time, they often refer to them just as the German church. But you have the Lutherans, you had Catholics, you had Baptists, and they effectively, if you read the story of Rudi Voba and Helmut Hübner, they even had agents basically placed inside the Mormon church. Another great resource for that, if you haven't read it, is David Conley Nelson's phenomenal book, Moroni and the Swastika, in which he talks about how they just basically hijacked the organization. And the Mormon resistance was three teenage boys, one of whom was executed and the other two were condemned to lifelong sentences. One of them was liberated by the Soviets and so had to go and fight for years in the Soviet army, in the Red Army, before he could be released. The other one, liberated by the Americans, made it back to America. And so the two of them made it back to America, but the ringleader wound up executed. And so, Martin Niemöller is the guy who then, for whom, and I've said this many times now, I think I probably close every broadcast of Charlatans this way. We must remember that it was Martin Niemöller who said, first they came for the socialists. That was the atheists. Everybody knew that was the atheists. Well, and socialists, just socialists. Max Sievers was a socialist and a trade unionist. Everybody was. All the godless pretty much were. And not just godless, but it was, atheism was very popular among socialists. And he says, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. Less famous are the words that of the document that he got Christian ministers to sign after the war, compelled by his conscience to say that through us, irreparable harm was caused. I don't know the exact word for word quote, but that they confessed, the German ministers, by conscience, and it deserves to be stated with respect. The German Christian pastors united to say, we were complicit in what the Nazis did because we didn't speak out, because we had the chance. We saw what was happening. We saw the movement. When I heard Paula White, I believe it was, or maybe it was the CBN broadcaster, I wish I had the clip pulled up right now, mentioning that it's not just that Paula White has an office where she is mandating policy or advocating for policy, or straight up issuing what can only be effectively described as policy. It's that they say they have placed persons in every sector of the executive branch to coordinate with her the faith initiatives throughout the federal government. It feels to me like Freethinkers Hall all over again. And I could be afraid to speak out for what they will do to me, what they could do to me, what they could do to us. But it's like I said in my godless sermon, forgetting is not forgiving. Forgetting is not forgiving. For the oppressor, it's so much better. Because as long as he never has to confess, as long as you don't remember what the crime was, he never has to repent. He never gets held to account if we forget. Don't forget Max Sievers. Don't forget Freethinkers Hall. Don't forget that this is how it happens. Don't forget Martin Niemöller. But like I said, the first act of defiance is Martin Niemöller's act of defiance that sadly Anne Frank couldn't fulfill. Sadly, Max Sievers couldn't fulfill. That was to survive. At all costs, Martin Niemöller tried to survive. First act of defiance, if you must defy an oppressor, is to survive. Second act of defiance is to do what Anne Frank did and bear witness, even if it's just notes in your phone or on your in your email or on your or get a moleskin journal. Start something today that your children or grandchildren or that history will remember and say, this is what it was. They saw it happening and they bore witness and they said, I won't risk my life because I'm going to survive, but I am going to bear witness. This is what happened. This is what I saw, and be personal about it. Remember that I mentioned before, one of the controversies about Anne Frank's diary is that her father, Otto Frank, censored the parts where she admits to that she admits trying to kiss a friend of hers who was a girl, and how she fantasized about women's bodies more than boys' bodies. And she was more interested in women than she was in men. And that he didn't want that remembered, didn't want her remembered that way. And it does make sense that a man with conservative sensibilities, publishing the intimate thoughts of his daughter would want to protect her image. But, when it was later published, then when the whole diary was later published, activists brought up, it deserves to be mentioned at least that she didn't go into any lewd details. She just said that she liked girls and there was representation. And it does make sense at an appropriate age for people who are potentially gay and lesbian to see that Anne Frank was one of them. And to see the representation there. That was the version of the Anne Frank's diary you've heard of when people say that it's being removed from libraries. It was being removed from libraries in the first Trump administration because they said it was smut. That she admitted that she asked a friend if she could kiss her and she said no. Not my phone, somebody else's. I mean, the first act of defiance is to survive. The second act of defiance is to bear witness. The third act of defiance is to do what Max Sievers did and to act clever, to act covertly or overtly, with a conscious awareness that you don't have to do this necessarily, that you can work behind the scenes, you can be an observer and still be effective in the resistance. You don't have to do anything dangerous. But there is a level where there comes a time for people of conscience who are prepared to accept the consequences to act. I don't expect anybody to have to act in doing anything illicit or illegal in any way in where we are now at this point in time. And I don't expect I ever will call on anyone to do so, nor will I, frankly. That's not my job. Maybe it's somebody else's. It's not my job. That's not what I do. I am here to motivate people in those first two categories. Survive. You don't need to do anything that puts you in harm's way. Survive. 2, bear witness. Keep a journal. keep a video journal, keep something that will be able to look back on in the future. In that sermon that I gave the shocking statistics of how they have studied how many young people can name any of the concentration camps in Poland or Germany. And it was startlingly low. How many of them could name who the key leaders were in the Reich? How many of them knew the difference between Germany's leaders and leader and Italy's or Japan's or America's or Great Britain or Soviet Union? How many could tell the difference between a socialist and a national socialist? What is the difference? What is the functional difference? Why is the one called like the other? Forgetting is not forgiving. Because it's for the oppressor, it's so much better because it can play the playbook the same way. Stephen Miller is in this administration. You don't have to look hard into this man's history to see him very much aware, very much a student of fascism, and see that everything that this man is connected to comes out of the same playbook. And we see it again and again. This is the riskiest thing that I do, is to come out and point out and say, I'm not saying vote this way or vote that way. I don't care. I'm not saying I will discriminate against somebody for how they vote or who they support in terms of our practices at the Church of Korihor. Don't ask, don't tell. I don't care. The point that I'm making here is we have to bear witness. And it's part of my role as a herald of reason to call it out publicly. And so I have taken this on. I've created this role for myself, and it's risky. And if I don't do it, if I don't take this time and this opportunity to call out what I see as oppression, not a political oppression, but an oppression of people that is getting people killed. I don't know how many of you saw that this so-called alligator Alcatraz. Right now, there are reports coming out of there of people getting sick because they're not getting medical treatment and they're not getting properly screened. There was apparently an outbreak of some respiratory illness out there. How many times are we going to relive this story? How long is it going to be before we start talking about 6 feet? Before we start talking about what, refrigerated trucks again? How long is it going to be this time? Something has to be said. Something has to be done. To stand up and say, you don't have to pick up any. Nobody has any call for violence in this. There's no call for violence, and it won't work. But everybody needs to stop and pay attention and bear witness. If you pick up a stone and throw it, we saw what happened with the Boston Massacre. Okay, you don't have to get involved in the violence to fight. It can be simply, I'm going to survive, and people are going to remember what happened here, and this can never happen again. Forgetting is not forgiving. All right, now we got to finish off with something a little more upbeat, because now I brought the whole mood down. I just want to let you guys know I am trying to get things organized at the Church of Korihor so that our missions are more effective. I am kind of sucking at it right now. Please forgive me. I'm going to get my email sorted out, that situation. I'm working on some new features at the Church of Korihor so that we can organize more effectively. We do need volunteers. We do need people who want to engage in what we're doing. And we do need to have some fun, and we do need to get together. That's part of what we're organizing right now. I want to see your faces if I can in any way. I want to start organizing some local meetings this fall. By December, I want to start being able to post pictures of Corohors getting together all over this beautiful country. We are active and we're doing the work. And I don't expect anybody to give me $1,000 or $3,000 to do the work so that you can get 7 blessings. For what it's worth, I do have a Cash App if somebody wants to support me directly. I'm not asking for that, but I am making it available because I cannot in good conscience not do it with how much time I spend doing this. But also I do ask people, as often as possible, support our luminaries, support our missions. You can go to corohor.org. There's a donate button if you have the means. Boy, it sure would help. Otherwise, a sponsoring contributorship, $48 a year, or a contributorship of $2 a month. We get enough of those, we won't have to worry about any of these setbacks. But right now, we're doing the best we can. I love you guys. Thanks for joining me on the show. Don't forget that charlatans never change. And let's remind ourselves, because I haven't loaded up a closing hymn, because my intention wasn't to do this. And I know that I did this last time. I got to come up with more similar hymns. It cracks me up to remind myself every time that we are out here trying to get more money than God. I love it.
We built this hall with borrowed bills, wrote these songs on broken windowsills, our altars made of old tin foil, a godless church built on digital soil. But if the poor church mice who passed those plates woke up with a Robin Hoods in their face, we robbed St. Peter right down to the floor. Finally make their God stand for something more. Oh, we'd fleece Mammon's coffers, their starving flock to feed, send them back to Jesus without their means. So those Judas steeples into unholy sod, at last we'd have more money than God. If Uncle Sam had their money, he could feed the folks they don't. The godly men get elected so that they won't. While they dance round the mountain with their golden calf, will cast their tablets down on Yahweh's behalf. When saints who pay to pray in their pews look to Korah, get some good news. Oh, we'd fleece Mammon's coffers, their starving flock to feed, send them back to Jesus without their means. So those Judas steeples into unholy sod, at last we'd have more money than God. Their golden gates won't let us in, nor the widows might redeem their sins. Grabbing images paint a hell so bold, but golden plates can't indulge their souls. With their 30 pieces of silver we'll escape their hell. If they try to stop us, we'll ring their bell. If they get up the nights on their graves, we'll trot. Finally have more money than God.